Hello and welcome to Scripture Untangled, a podcast by the Canadian Bible Society. My name is Joanna LaFleur. I'm a friend of the Canadian Bible Society, and I'm going to be your guide for today's episode. Today, Canadian Mayor Marianne Meed Ward is in conversation with journalist Lorna Dueck. Mayor Marianne describes herself as someone who simply was a good listener to her neighbors, and by 2022, it drew her into the politics of her city of Burlington, Ontario. A beautiful city on the shores of Lake Ontario, Burlington is located between Toronto and Hamilton, and it's fighting to be a place that provides jobs and homes for its people. So in that effort, Mayor Marianne has become chair of the Ontario Big City Mayors Group, and she joins journalist Lorna Dueck in conversation about where that intersects with her faith. Enjoy the conversation.
As chair of Ontario Big City Mayors, Marianne Meed Ward has stepped into leadership on one of the biggest problems facing Canada. Let's hear that in her own words.
There is a humanitarian crisis unfolding in our streets, big cities, small cities, all across our province and across our country. People are struggling with mental health, addictions, homelessness, and we're seeing it in encampments in every community across this province.
That's the challenge Mayor Marianne Meed Ward is putting to voice on behalf of mayors in 29 of the largest cities in Ontario. And it may come as a surprise to some of her constituents that motivations for her actions come not only from politics, but are also shaped by her love of Scripture. Marianne, welcome to Scripture Untangled.
Great to be with you today.
Well, thank you for grappling with the many challenges you do. Let's just let our audience know you're my mayor. I live in your city of beautiful Burlington. Thank you for all you do for us. I see you everywhere. And if we run out of time, I'll just start listing all the places. So I'm really delighted. We're your office to my home office. It's lovely to have you with us. How are you doing?
Very well. I love what I do, love our community, and of course the people in it. And it's a real privilege to serve. So happy to talk a little bit more about that today.
All right. Well, let's talk about your role as chair of the Big City Mayors, because it captures such a huge part of the homelessness and mental health crisis in Canada. Why could you just not ignore that? Why all of a sudden make this a large campaign for the country?
This is an issue that is affecting municipalities across Canada and really beyond. We see it in the US as well and around the world. And, my heart is breaking for people that find themselves living on the streets. And often it starts with a mental health crisis or a family crisis. It can then slide into addiction as people try to cope with the pain of their life. And then that leads to homelessness. Not always in that order, but they're very, very interconnected. And, I grew up in a very religious home, going to church and going to Bible camp and memorizing scriptures as a kid. And I just remember a lot of the stories that really resonated with me and stuck with me as a child. And one of them was that we have to care for people who are less fortunate than ourselves. And of course, the example of Jesus was he went to care for and help the people that were considered, beyond helping, the worst of the sinners, if you will, and showed them love and compassion. And his example is that nobody is beyond helping. And instead of judging, which is often what the stories of the Bible are about, that the religious leaders of the day judged people. It was their own fault for being there. And certainly I've heard that. I hear that today, that people will suggest that perhaps they just need to, quote, get a job. Well, if you're homeless and you don't have an address and you're addicted to a substance, and you're struggling with a mental health crisis, you're not necessarily able to get a job or hold a job or even be employed by somebody. So the issues are more complex than that. And, I think the example of Jesus back in his day, 2,000 years ago, is that the world had had enough judgment at that time. And what was needed was love and compassion and care. And, certainly I try to approach the work that I do with a sense of love and compassion for the people of the city that I serve, to understand what their needs are, what their challenges are, why they're in the situation that they are in, and then use this incredible privilege and platform that I have as mayor, and the ability that I have to have people return my phone call, the rooms that I can be in to spread the message because of this incredible privileged platform. There's a duty and an obligation on my part to use it to help others.
And how is the battle going? Are you making progress on the homelessness crisis?
We have certainly gotten the government's attention.
Well, and I do want to say, I live in a city where I've been here for almost 35 years. We had never seen homelessness in this Canadian city of Burlington, which many people across the country could say. We had, what I was thinking is, this is a crisis coming along, and now you have been able to move people into shelter. But across the greatest needs, is that happening? What's the battle?
So very recently, the government did announce some funding for, they're calling it heart hubs, so housing hubs with wraparound supports. Because if someone has landed on the streets because of an addiction or mental health crisis, they need more than shelter. They need more than a roof over their head, or it becomes a revolving door if you don't understand or address the reasons why people end up on the street. And so that, it's very welcome and it's very helpful. And we know that some of the advocacy that we've been at this as a group of mayors for a number of years. We've produced a policy paper. We've met with Minister Sylvia Jones as health minister. We've advocated at conferences and with other ministers and ministries for a number of years. And what led to this campaign was it's really a growing problem. It's grown exponentially. And in Ontario now, there are 1,400 encampments in different cities. And that's not the number of people who are unhoused. That's just the number of encampments. And there are, by, conservative estimates, tens of thousands of people living on the streets, often migrating among communities to chase the services. And so one of the things that we have said as part of our campaign called solvethecrisis.ca is there needs to be a comprehensive Ontario-wide way to fix this, rather than a single funding announcement in a single community that will draw people from neighboring communities that don't have those resources. And then you're overwhelmed before you even get started. And so the recent announcement was for 340 some odd beds, which is very welcome, but it's a drop in the bucket, and it's only in those communities that are able to get up and running. So we do, we've said a funding announcement is not an action plan that solves it for everyone. And, and it's not a big city issue anymore. And that's why I think it's really captured the public's attention and care. We've had thousands and thousands of letters written to government as a result of our campaign, because people are seeing it in smaller communities that never experienced this before, rural and northern, of course, but also big cities. But it's not just a big city issue anymore. So residents, I've been actually pleased that residents have said, solve it for the folks that are there, because we want better for them, but also they're feeling unsafe in their communities. They aren't able to go and use certain parks or downtown areas in some communities. The people in these encampments are not safe. There's sex trafficking, drug use. Very recently, there was some homicides. So, this is not a situation that we can simply look the other way. We have to solve this for everybody's sake.
Marianne, you have a 22-year career in journalism, and before politics took over. Mm-hmm. And you were for years, first a staff writer at Faith Today magazine, and then in 1996 to 99, you were the editor of Faith Today, and it's still a great voice for hundreds of churches across Canada. What advice have you got for Canada's churches about the homelessness crisis?
I want to praise the churches that I know of. Certainly in Burlington, I know those the best who have been stepping into this space. And we are the arms and legs of Jesus on this earth. And I see churches providing meal programs, providing social supports, providing clothing exchanges, working together across denominational lines, which I always love to see, partnering, not competing, all in the service of reaching out to people who are less fortunate, and then doing advocacy. I get churches calling me to say, I've got people that come looking for help, and what can I do? And can we open more shelters? Can we open more beds? And I would say keep doing that. And if you're a church that isn't doing that, you should be. You should be, and not just because the crisis is ever more acute, but this is the call that we've been given, is to care for people who are less fortunate than ourselves, and not speak the love of Jesus, but show it through our actions. And they are doing that. But you can also, in very immediate practical terms, go to solvethecrisis.ca, sign the petition, add your voice, add your comments and your personal experience, because that is getting the government's attention. And we have had social service providers, housing providers, police, chambers of commerce, tourism organizations. Everyone is experiencing this in a little bit different way and saying something needs to be done. And they're adding their voice to the need for a comprehensive plan. And if you want to talk, dollars and cents, if that wasn't enough of a reason, which it should be, but if you want to talk dollars and cents, it costs far more to have our hospitals and our jails function as homeless shelters than it would be to actually provide the front end housing and supports that people need.
Well, thank you for that advocacy and that challenge to our churches too. So what is the why for you in politics? Why do you care so deeply for your city and for the big cities of Ontario?
It's the why that's motivated me since I was really a young girl. It's how can I help? How can I help either the person standing in front of me? How can I help my community? How can I make the world a better place? And I would say that I'm really motivated by the parable of the talents. Which is an interesting parable, and the word talent was their currency, but we could see it as using your talents for the good of the whole. And the story goes that the master gave his slaves or his workers each some coins to invest or do what they would with them, and each of them did something a little different. But one of them was so worried about losing, like investing and losing or making a bad choice, hid the talents in the backyard and was chastised and actually punished by the master at the end of the day, because that's not what they were for. They're not for hiding. And I can remember feeling, first of all, the first time I ever heard this story as a young child, not understanding it at all. Why would, that sounded actually kind of logical to me. If you were afraid or didn't know what to do, then just, at least hang on to what you got. But that's not what we're here for. And it requires courage. It requires taking risks. It requires us to fail sometimes as on our way to success. And, folks may not know about me that I ran in 2 elections that I lost before I started winning. And if I had stopped after the first or even the second loss, I wouldn't be here today. And so failure is actually a lesson if you embrace it and don't see it as a source of shame. So that, that parable really stuck with me, along with all of the other exhortations that we have the parable of the Good Samaritan, helping people that would normally be seen as your enemy. Love thy neighbor. All of these teachings had a profound impact on myself, and I'm part of my personality is to be helpful to people. That's always been part of who I am. But this has given it far more reason and meaning and imperative that if I have the ability to have a platform, to acquire a voice, to use my words for the good of the whole, then it's actually a duty now. It's not an option.
Well, you speak with wonderful enthusiasm, because this is not your first round at it, as you say. But what have been the surprises in politics that have disappointed you? Has there been a surprise that you said, "Oh, this is not a good part of the journey"?
Lots of surprises. How long everything takes, and people laugh when they say, "You thought that was surprising?" Things take longer than they should, and that's my optimism, is that we should be able to address these things if we all come together. The competition that exists rather than collaboration. When things go political with a big P, not so good way, that can really hinder progress. And then you throw partisan politics into it, even more so, where people will reject a good idea because it comes from a party that's not theirs. And that's one of the reasons I love the municipal level. It is not party based, at least not in Ontario. So it really is about, do we agree on this idea as a way to solve things? But I will say that probably the biggest concern that I have today is the rise of misinformation and hate that is spread predominantly online. And that has a real effect on democracy. It has a real effect on people's willingness to participate in democracy. And, speaking as an elected official, I can tell you, there's been a huge uptick in harassment and abuse that elected officials experience. I have a town hall meeting tonight, and we're going to have extra security because of threats from an individual. And people don't want to run for office. They leave office because of it. Other people may not want to participate, whether they run for office or not, but even go to a town hall meeting if it devolves into chaos. People don't want to put their opinions out on social media because they'll be relentlessly attacked and bullied. And this is really compromising our ability. And it's not unique to Ontario or Burlington or Canada. This is a global problem. And that's probably my biggest concern, is the state of democracy in our world.
Taking a moment out of the conversation to tell you about the Bible course, because whether you're a seasoned Bible reader or you're just starting on your journey, the Bible course offers a superb overview of the world's best-selling book. This 8-session course will help you grow in your understanding of the Bible. Using a unique storyline, the Bible course shows you how key events, books, and characters all fit together. It's great for in-person groups or digital gatherings. It can be used anywhere you like. You can watch the first session for free and review the accompanying course guide. Go to biblecourse.ca to learn more. That's biblecourse.ca. And the link will be down in the show notes.
Okay. Let's on that note of seeing the conflict. Let's pivot to some personal background now on how you've been shaped for this, right on the cutting edge. Just tell us first where your love for the Bible began.
I think it is learning about the stories and how profound, some of the parables, but more than that, the Psalms and, the stories in the New Testament, the new way that Jesus showed people, the hopefulness that was there, and growing up with that and memorizing. So I won lots of prizes in my Bible camp for being able to memorize the scriptures. Although I've lost some of it. You have to practice it, right? But those stories had a profound shaping influence on who I am and who I wanted to be, and they in the world, and they really resonated with me. And there's a lot of valuable insights, and whether people receive that as stories or divine wisdom at the how I know other people have found value in those teachings just because they're really good. They're really important stories, and you don't have to come to it initially with a faith. You can just receive the words and receive the information and let it speak to you. And I think before I really sort of understood it the way I would now, those stories just spoke to me.
Well, in the demands that a 24/7 political clock takes and the kind of scheduling you do, can we talk about where you find time, how you craft time to still be able to explore the Bible, read the Bible?
It's tough. It is tough. And there are times when I don't find the time. And there's no easy way to say that. It's just a reality of the job. And, in those moments, I call upon memory. I call upon what I've known and had the privilege to study. I was able to spend a year studying the Bible right after high school before I went into university. And so, and I don't want to justify that. I'm just saying that that's true.
No, it's a very demanding
right?
job. Yeah.
That's true. And it's real, but I have it with me because of that, commitment to study and memory that has been there for a long time. And so, I really do encourage people to do that, but also to recognize that you always have it in you. You always have it with you. Even if you don't have a book in front of you, you can call up the teachings and rely upon them as your guide.
I think I saw that happen this summer as I watched our city that you lead face a catastrophic flood this summer. And you were there with families who were devastated. And I was moved, Marianne, by your compassion in that crisis. What's happening spiritually for you when you are on the front line of real need like that kind of crisis?
I've always led from the heart. I try to, and connecting to person. There's a certain amount of empathy around what if this were me? What if this was my family and my household? And that's a choice to develop that sense of empathy, and it can be lost. It can be lost with people who can quote the scripture better than I can and remember the verses. And there's verses about that it has to be more than words and show. It has to be inside you. It has to be something that you live and is really a natural outpouring of believing that we are here to serve and to help others. And probably one of the biggest compliments, and thank you for saying what you just did, is as people say, it seems authentic for you. You genuinely care for people, and that's true. That is true, and they see it. And in the midst of that, open-hearted leadership, you still have to find a way to get the strength to encounter those day-to-day disappointments, the fact that things take too long, the fact that you can't always get your colleagues or other levels of government to agree to move forward with a solution. And you have to nevertheless find the strength and the resilience to carry on.
Well, it has been quite a year for resilience for you. On a personal side, your family has not been immune to fear and suffering. And recently, as your husband Pete battled cancer treatments, tell us about the Bible being with you at that time, the truth of God's presence.
I've been so moved. And sometimes when you're in a situation like this, you really rely on the strength of others because you feel like you don't have it. And there are many days when I feel like I don't have that strength. And I want to say to people out there that it is so important for us to reach out to each other and say, I'm praying for you, or you're in my thoughts. And I can tell you that so many people reached out during this period of time. And I would say their strength carried me through, their prayers carried me through when we were just in the midst of wondering what this all was. And, I'm an optimistic person. I choose to, believe that things will turn out, but there were some dark days where you don't know. You don't know if it's going to turn out, and you don't have the answers yet. And I would say sometimes then I couldn't be my best advocate. I needed other people to lift me up and hold me in their thoughts and prayers.
That's a beautiful reminder that the family of God needs to be the family during crisis like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting how you articulate you felt a weakness, because in the wake of that cancer experience, and some of this happens because a mayor's office comes with a communications mandate and you have a team that's chasing along with you on that. But in the wake of Pete's cancer, I saw both you and Pete activate politically on healthcare gaps that would affect many of our families. Was that again love for neighbor?
Absolutely, 100%. And my husband doesn't like to be in the spotlight, especially like at all, let alone something about something that's so deeply personal to him. And yet I saw him step out of that comfort zone, step into the spotlight where he never wants to be, to help address an issue, raise awareness about an issue that needs to be fixed, and to use our experience to help others. And and my role was to support him through that, and to give him the support that he needed, because this is natural for me. It's part of my job, but it's not natural for him. And so the fact that we could do it together and support each other in that way was really beautiful for us as a couple. And to actually use my platform to give him a voice was lovely. To be able to do that. And
those battling cancer, you were using your platform for not just Pete's cancer, but for others, and making a case for a more equitable cancer treatment. It's excellent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm very conscious of the fact that we've gotten in on your schedule on a day when you have a town hall, which in our city is a big deal. It's a big deal. And now I hear you got to have extra security at it because of the democracy crisis this nation is facing. Yes. But before we let you go, can you just suggest how those of us who are drawn together through the Canadian Bible Society, Marianne, we're an interesting collection that enjoy this podcast, but how might we be Canadians who bring faith forward in a population that seems rather uninterested in God?
That's a great question. And I always go back to the lesson, the example of Jesus. Jesus didn't start with God. Jesus started with stories. Jesus started with compassion. Every story that he told was about something people could relate to. And, think about the answer, the whole story of the Good Samaritan. How did he tell that story? He was asked a theological question about who is my neighbor, because he said you need to love your neighbor. If he had given a theological answer based on a whole set of scriptures, justifying who your neighbor is and cross-referencing to other scriptures and so forth, you probably would have lost the audience. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing for a theological school, but if we're talking about trying to reach people who wouldn't normally want to pick up a Bible, wouldn't normally want to hear these stories. You start with Jesus' example, and he told a story that was compelling, that was thought-provoking, that was at its essence not complicated, not theological speak. And this is something that has guided me even in my previous career as a journalist, that sometimes we get too thinky and we get too jargony, and we lose our audience. We mean well, but we've forgotten that the best way to connect with people is through our heart, through empathy, through telling a story that people can see themselves in. And then at the very end, the lesson is there. But by the time you're there, getting the lesson, you don't realize that you've just gotten a lesson. So, gets under people's normal defenses, and maybe that's why it struck me the way it did when I was a young girl. These were stories like the fables I read, like the story. I loved to read books. I was an avid reader, and but I look back now and think about the stories that stayed with me. It was those, because of the nature of what they are.
The nature of Holy Scripture. Mayor Marianne Meed Ward, thank you. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedule and visiting with the Canadian Bible Society on Scripture Untangled, and all the best as you continue to serve as chair of Big Mayors in Ontario, Big City Mayors in Ontario, and for that fantastic crisis that you're working on for the homeless issues that our nation is facing. All of God's blessing to you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.